I'm with Nancy Vernon at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, which her mother, the one and only Dolores Cannon, started. How many years ago? Was it 36 years ago?
Okay, well, she didn't start it.
Or she helped it? Or
she
something.
was here when it started.
Yeah.
And then when the second year, when Lou Ferry started it, he was the one who was the initiator of it up until his passing.
Oh, I see.
I think in 2010 or 11, I believe. But they started here at the end of the Ozarks, and like their first meeting that they had, which would have been, I believe, in '89, there was like 50 people here. And from there, it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
But then after his passing, it was run for a couple of years by different organizations, and then they asked Dolores, because she'd been involved from the beginning, would you like to take it over? And she was like, well, I do not want to disappear, and yes, of course I will.
Yeah.
And then she was involved with it under the cap of Ozark Mountain Publishing for 2 years before she passed. And so we decided we've got to keep this going, because it was like a time-honored tradition. And so Ozark Mountain Publishing has then been the sponsor since 2013 to present, and hopefully on into the future.
Yeah. I've heard, you know, since I've done my show, a lot of people have said, oh, you got to go to the Ozark Conference. It's great. And I'm telling you, I love it. It's so beautiful here in Eureka Springs.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went to the haunted hotel, went on a tour the other night. That was really amazing. So, yeah, really good stuff. So I talked to, there's a woman that flew over Germany because of your mother, and I'm going to introduce you to her later today. Her name's Daniela, and she flew exclusively for this, and it was all about your mother, because she first started reading Dolores Cannon books years ago. She got really into it, and then she's watched everything there is on YouTube, and there's a lot on YouTube. Your mother has a lot of things on YouTube. And so she was so excited to come to this conference. This is the only conference she's coming to in the United States. And again, I'll introduce you. But it was all because of what your mother did.
Of Mama.
And my producer, Donna, who's here today, watches the YouTube all the time. Has read the books. She's really into a lot of what your mother did. But so let's hear what it was like to grow up as a child with your mother being Dolores Cannon, and how did she get into all this? Okay,
well, growing up, Mom's a Navy wife, so we would move every 2.5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that was norm. And then we lived in Beeville, Texas. My father, who had learned hypnosis, I believe in Hong Kong, was asked by a doctor to help a woman with, I believe it was an eating disorder. And while they were working with her, and that was the old-fashioned hypnosis with watch the shiny object and stuff like that. And while he was working with her, something was said about, like, I used to be this or something. And of course, they're both looking at each other going, what? And so since they didn't know what they were stepping into, and past lives and reincarnation was not a subject in the mid-60s. So it was not something known of. They started experimenting. And he said, okay, well, when I count to 3, let's go back to when you were, like, whatever she said. So he'd count her back, and all of a sudden, she's talking in with this accent. And it's like, who are you? You know, and she's saying, you know, she's this other person and describing things from another time period than what they were living in then. And so then they would experiment. It's like, oh, okay, well, they do a lot of questions. And said, okay, well, when I count to 3, let's go back another 100 years or something like that. And this person kept coming up with different accents, different ways of talking, mannerisms. And so that opened up like this huge window of curiosity. And one of the things they went between the lives. And at that time, Mom called it universal life. And so it was when you died before you came back, and they would ask this spirit or whatever questions, and this person actually gave us, they wanted to know about their future. And she said, well, I see you talking to my dad in a mountain area, and I see you sitting with your great-grandchildren. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Not long after that, he was involved in a very bad accident. And that's the emotional part. And my mom went to the hospital, and they're telling her, you know, he's not going to make it. He's going to die. And she's like, no, we talked to the spirit. And of course, she couldn't tell them that. And they said they saw him with his great-grandchildren. He didn't have any grandchildren yet. You know, and so that's what she had to hang on to. He survived. And after he got out of the hospital, well, the Navy moved us up to Arkansas. And then Mom says, you know, all the kids grew up and stuff like that, and they all got out of the house, and then it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? Well, this doorway got opened. My father wasn't interested in it anymore, but Mom's like, that was a curiosity. I want to know more about it. So she learned how to do hypnosis. And so thus started her track. And now, of course, 21 books later, you know, all on what she uncovered and found. And then, of course, she has their hypnosis class that she filmed, QHHT, and that was teaching people the technique that she developed to be able to go the levels that she learned to go to, talk to the subconscious about if the person could get healings, how they would do it, and helping people get past things.
Wow.
And so it all started back in the mid-'60s with that one person for an eating, like I said, I think it was an eating disorder.
Now, so would she be considered a pioneer in this type of thing?
She's been, that's what she's been earmarked on everything, was a pioneer.
Oh, wow.
Because back in the 60s, New Age, metaphysics, reincarnation, past life, there was the one book out, The Search for Bridie Murphy, and she said, like nowadays, she said that probably would never be printed because it was, back then it was cutting ground, but she said that's all there was to even look at.
Yeah.
And so they just, curiosity, they just kept going. And the one book she has is called 5 Lives Remembered. That was with that lady. And they had actually gone through these different lifetimes and stuff. And one, I think she was a poltergeist, and she was trying to get someone's attention by throwing things at them. I was like, okay. One was in Chicago. I'm gonna say Roaring 20s, but I don't know the time period. And she was going to go out on the town or something and putting makeup on. And she said she had her oatmeal in a pouch, and so Daddy asked her, well, did you cook the oatmeal? Because he doesn't know makeup. And he's like, well, no, it's the powder you put on your face. You pinch the cheeks and you bite the lips for the rosiness, and like, okay.
Well, that's from way back, yeah.
And it's stuff that, of course, Daddy knew no knowledge of it, so it wasn't like him feeding her information, just being totally surprised.
I read Leslie Kane's book on, like, you know, past lives and things like that. That was really interesting. There's a story about a little boy that seemed to know everything about World War II and the planes, and you know, I mean, there's so many things that are just so unexplainable, and it's I just feel like we know so little about what.
Oh yeah,
really
there's
is
been lots of
happening.
cases where kids are talking other languages, and they can't even talk yet, but they're rattling stuff off. The one proving case they had of reincarnation was the Shanti Devi case, and it was in India, and the girl remembered her previous life, talked about her husband, her kids, and actually took them to where she lived. And it was the one most famous proven case.
Oh,
so it's like, this is cool.
Yeah, wow. But science, I don't think science is ready to embrace a lot of this. You know, but there are, you know, I mean, I have a friend who's basically a scientist, and he's all about this. So I think it just has to do with how open-minded people.
That's, I think, one of the biggest things is come and just, when you want to be presented with something, just open your mind.
Yeah.
Don't think against anything, just listen to what they got to say.
Yeah.
And if some of it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay, just leave it.
Yeah.
But leave your mind open so that you're not saying it could only be this way.
Right.
You know,
I
so
agree.
that's the way I approach people. Ask me, well, what's your thought on this and this? And I said, well, I listen to this person, this person, this person, kind of put it all together, and then I come up with my own thoughts of what everybody's saying. And it may not be whole hog what they all agree on, but it's little bits and pieces, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were like moved out and establishing a family, whatever you were doing, did you like visit your mother's household and see like interesting people there? And I mean, did people come to see her a lot, or
Actually,
did she go to them?
It was usually she would go.
I see.
Whenever she would come home from trips and stuff, she'd say, I'd come back to my mountaintop. That's my sanctuary. She traveled all over the world, and I did a lot of traveling with her.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and so I got to meet a lot of interesting people along that road.
Oh, yeah.
Go to different countries, the different languages and stuff like that.
Yeah, fascinating. And this is something that people report all over the world, basically, these type of things. Yeah, yeah.
Like you said, the one lady who discovered her, who lives in Germany, we hear that all the time. We'll have people come up whenever Mom was alive, would come to the conference just to talk to her.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's like because they knew she would be here.
Yeah.
You know, so it was her thing.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Well, it's very nice, and thank you for having me, and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Okay.